And please join in the chant. And unsurpassed, penetrating and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. Well, first I want to check if people can hear us on Zoom. Can you hear my voice okay? Wonderful. And let's see who is on the screen. Let's introduce ourselves. Could you just unmute for a moment and say your name and where you're from? Let's start. I can see Pam up there. Maybe you could start.
Hi, I'm Pam from Canberra, down in Canberra.
And Scott.
I'm Scott Tyler from Salinas, California. Hi, everybody.
Hi. And I can see something. What name does that say?
Kathy.
That's Kathy. I think she's gone to the bathroom.
Ah, okay. Kathy. And we did have Mark from Pennsylvania with us too, but he could only stay for the sit, which is probably the best thing to stay for. And here in the Zendo, we've got Alex, Griffin, Tony, Navanwi, and myself, Neti. And this is a special day. This is sort of auspicious. It's our first time sitting in the Zendo here in Canberra, Twining Vines Zen Centre, Kato An Temple, Canberra, Australia. And I think I want to first start by acknowledging that this beautiful space that we're on has been cared for tens of thousands of years by the Ngunnawal people, and they still care for it. And I'm hoping that we can honour that, and the way that we can care for this land as well. I'd also like to particularly thank Mavanwi and Alex and Mavanwi's family for making it possible for us to have this space. It's a very beautiful space. And it felt like a good idea to talk about the name of our temple. Oh, is that Kathy has come back? Kathy, do you just want to unmute for a moment and say your name and where you're from?
I'm Kathy. I'm from Canberra, which is Ngunnawal Ngambri country.
Wonderful. Thank you. So it felt like a good idea to begin this talk, or make the topic of this talk, the name Twining Vines, which comes from a fascicle by Dogen Zenji. Dogen is one of our ancestors from Japan, primary ancestor in the Soto tradition, and also beloved too, also in other traditions, including the Soto Rinzai Diamond Sangha tradition. And in this fascicle, he talks about the process of face-to-face transmission. And there's many ways in which we can think about face-to-face transmission. One way is from the teacher to the student in a very specific direct line. And there are many wonderful stories of that process of teacher to student transmission. And the first well-known one is Shakyamuni Buddha sitting on the sermon seat, holding up a flower. As he twirls the flower and blinks, Mahakasyapa, one of his students, smiles. And that exchange of the twirling of the flower and the smiling is the recognition of the transmission between them, a recognition between them of their embodiment of the teachings. And we have lots of different texts that go through that face-to-face transmission from one ancestor to the next, all the way through to the present time. And it's a little unusual to have a tradition like that. I mean, it's more common in Buddhism, but not so common to have this specific lineage where you can track one person to the next, generation to generation, all the way through. And within that, of course, there are many people's names that get lost in the process, and particularly, of course, many women who don't get acknowledged in that process for all the various cultural reasons that occurred. But in more recent times, that is changing, which is a wonderful thing. So I'll read a quote from the Twining Vines Fascicle by Dogen, Fascicle 47. Teacher and disciple practice mutually is twining vines of Buddha ancestors. Twining vines of Buddha ancestors is the life stream of skin, flesh, bones, and marrow. Taking up a flower and blinking are twining vines. Breaking into a smile is skin, flesh, bones, and marrow. So this student-teacher relationship shows up in lots of different ways. It shows up in the formal way of being together in the Zendo, just like we're doing right now. We're in the Zendo. We're learning the forms. We're practicing the forms. The forms themselves are not necessarily any better than any other forms in any other tradition, but they're our particular forms, and they create moments of awareness and concentration and attention, and also hopefully a real sense of appreciation of the mere fact of our presence, the mere fact that we are experiencing anything. You know, we happen to be very fortunate that we're sitting here in this beautiful space. And actually, I was wondering, did you people, all of you on Zoom, could you hear all the birds through the sitting? Were you able to hear all of that? Isn't that wonderful? There's so many birds here in Canberra. It's just spectacular. So the forms, for example, coming up to the altar and Alex holding the incense and me standing there and then him passing the incense, that moment is a moment of experiencing, wholeheartedly experiencing reality. And that wholeheartedly experiencing of reality is profoundly nourishing. And that might seem surprising that it's so nourishing, but it's nourishing because this is where everything happens. Everything happens only now. It doesn't happen any other time. It doesn't happen in the past, and it doesn't happen in the future. So when we bring our full attention just to this present, hopefully we have that sense that like we get filled up by the abundance of the present moment, the fertility of the present moment. So this student-teacher relationship isn't only about studying the teachings, it's experiencing reality together, experiencing it together. And just like what we've been doing here as setting up the Zendo for today, and what we will ongoingly be doing as we kind of fine-tune things and improve things and add things, is we problem solve together and get to witness each other's problem solving. So for example, I ordered some zabutons and they just haven't arrived. And I've paid for them, and I've called them, and I've emailed them, and nobody's answering. So maybe the company's folded. They did send the zafus, so they were still functioning like a month ago. Maybe they're just busy and they're going to arrive. But there we have it. So we worked out some, well, I didn't, Navanwi and Alex worked out some alternatives with some special cushions that normally the dog gets to sit on. But we got them all washed up and cleaned up for today. You know, so naturally little things that happen in a Sangha, and of course not just between teacher and student, but between students and between people, between Sangha members. And we get to watch each other solve things, watch each other respond spontaneously to things as they arrive, and then we learn from that. We learn from each other. There's many, many ways in which I've watched my teacher over the years. Kokyo, Henkel, Osho was my teacher for many years, and also Daniel Taranyo in the Diamond Sangha tradition has been my teacher. And in years before that, Sabana Bazagi in Sydney was my teacher. And I've watched them over the years, just how they deal with ordinary things when they're talking to people, when something breaks, when something has to be done. And that's a form of transmission. That's the transmission. In the body, it's kind of often in the body, how things happen in the body. And then we also have the tradition of meeting face to face literally in Dokusan, which is when the student and the teacher meet face to face and have a conversation. And it's a different type of conversation to regular conversation. It's a type of conversation that you don't have in other spaces, where you're really, the words are pared down to talking about really what matters, talking about what matters. So this image of twining vines, I've got some lovely photos of some wisteria. There's a tree not far from here, on the other side from here, is it Roger Mountain or Mount Rogers?
Mount Rogers.
Mount Rogers. On the other side of Mount Rogers, there's a wisteria, the largest one I've ever seen. There's a very large eucalyptus tree, and at the base of it, almost as wide as the trunk of the eucalyptus itself, is this enormous wisteria. Like it's, well, actually, I'm exaggerating. The eucalyptus is maybe a metre wide, 3 feet wide. The wisteria is maybe a foot wide or 30 centimetres wide, and it winds all the way up the eucalyptus tree. It's just extraordinary. Vines twining all the way up. So this image of twining vines is, like Dogen says, sort of the twining vines of the student and teacher, but it's also the twining vines of anything really that you want to, anything that you interact with, you are twining with them. Twining vines is another way of saying interpenetration or interbeing or mutual benefit. We're intertwined with everything, and some things it's obvious that we're intertwined with, or more obvious to some people, less obvious maybe to others, but we're intertwined with many, many things that we're consciously aware of. And there's things we are not aware of that we're intertwined with. There's things we like being intertwined with. And there's things that we don't like being intertwined with. And often the hardships actually are very beneficial. Sometimes the hardships turn out to be the most beneficial things that we intertwine with. Partly because sometimes they push us into parts of ourselves that we've avoided. Sometimes because they push us to be more than who we thought we could be, to use our skill sets in ways that we didn't think we could use them. And then we discover we can. And that's a really joyful thing when we discover our capacity can grow and can extend. So I'm just going to read another quote from the same Fascicle. And these first two quotes are actually up on our website too. So Dogen goes on to say, study further. The seeds of twining vines have the power of dropping away body. Branches, leaves, flowers and fruit of twining vines do and do not interpenetrate one another. Thus, Buddha ancestors appear and the fundamental point is actualized. So this fundamental point is not something that we can put into words very well, but it's actualized just whenever we do anything wholeheartedly. with full attention, then we're actualizing the fundamental point. So I think a skillful thing for us to do is to seek out the seeds, branches, leaves, flowers, and fruit of twining vines. And to seek them out doesn't actually mean we have to go anywhere, but it does require a receptivity in us. There's infinite tasks that need to be done in the world. There's infinite suffering in the world. There's infinite troubles in the world. And there's infinite possibilities for creativity and for intellectual engagement and for caring engagement. So to seek out the seeds, roots, leaves, and fruit of twining vines just requires an awareness, an open awareness moment to moment. And then things pass in front of us and then we simply go along with it. It's like the bus pulls up and we hop on. Things come by, we join in. There's one other quote too from the same Fascicle. Let me just see how we're doing for time. Rujing, who was Dogen's teacher, Rujing, my late master, old Buddha, said, "Gourd vines entangle with gourd vines. Gourd vines entangle with gourd vines means that Buddha ancestors thoroughly experience Buddha ancestors. Buddha ancestors merge with Buddha ancestors in realization. This is transmitting mind to mind." So you probably noticed that in this Fascicle, as in many of Dogen's, he refers to Buddha ancestors a lot. And Buddha ancestors are the literal ancestors for whom we have great gratitude for passing the Dharma on to us. But Buddha ancestors also are the plants and animals and the rocks and minerals and the rivers and mountains that make it possible for us to be here. They are also our ancestors. So our task is to find out what resonates for us as a way to express our true nature, our Buddha nature. What resonates for us? Where do we want to meet face to face? With whom and how do we want to meet face to face? And when we find something, it's good to commit to it, not blindly commit to it, but with some sense of trust and openness that it might be precious, that it might be really beneficial, that it might be really worth committing to it. And if you do that wholeheartedly, if we do that wholeheartedly, it might turn out that we make a mistake and then we go, oops, I thought that was going to work and it didn't, and that's fine, and on we go. But we might also discover something very rich, something very precious. Because this face-to-face transmission, it's rare in modern times. It was rare in ancient times, but it's even more rare in modern times. And we can find it multiple ways. Besides my love of the Dharma, as with many, many of us, I've also have deep concerns about our planet itself, about the environment itself. So we can find other places to resonate. For the last few years, I've found a lot of resonance with people in Extinction Rebellion. And I'm glad to be able to be here helping create a Sangha where we can include that, find a way to include that in our practice. That we can include the activity of trying to wake people up to the situation of the earth and how we are mistreating it, how we can wake people up with maintaining a kind of stillness within that activity. So we can bring we can bring stillness into that activity. And that is actually nourishing for other people too, because sometimes activist work can have too much activity in it, and then it gets tiring and exhausting for people. And that's not a good thing for people to get tired and jaded and maybe burnt out. So there's a place for the stillness and the activity to come together in activism as well as in the Zendo. So I've got one last thing I'd like to quote from Suzuki Roshi's Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. Everyone knows, many people know this book, wonderful book. And he's quoting from Dogen in here as well. This is on page 109, and he says, Dogen Zenji said, even though it is midnight, dawn is here. Even though dawn comes, it is nighttime. So that's the quote from Dogen. Even though it is midnight, dawn is here. Even though dawn comes, it is nighttime. And then Suzuki Roshi comments, this kind of statement conveys the understanding transmitted from Buddha to the ancestors and from the ancestors to Dogen and to us. Nighttime and daytime are not different. The same thing is sometimes called nighttime, sometimes called daytime. They are one thing. Zen practice and everyday activity are one thing. We call Zazen everyday life and everyday life Zazen. But usually we think, now Zazen is over and we will go about our everyday activity. But this is not right understanding. They are the same thing. We have nowhere to escape. So in activity, there should be calmness, and in calmness, there should be activity. Calmness and activity are not different. Each existence depends on something else. Strictly speaking, there are no separate individual existences. There are just many names for one existence. Sometimes people put stress on oneness, but this is not our understanding. We do not emphasize any point in particular, not even oneness. Oneness is valuable, but variety is also wonderful. That's from Suzuki Roshi commenting on Dogen. I think I might have said enough for now. Let's do a finishing verse, and then we can have comments and questions from the Zendo or from people on the Zoom Zendo. And if you've got the chant card and you want to join in, please join in. Beings are numberless, I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable, I vow to become it. So I'm not sure how well people on Zoom will be able to hear in the Zendo, but let's experiment. And if anyone on Zoom has a question or a comment, just sort of raise your hand, because I can see quite clearly, and Alex can also see and can unmute people people can unmute themselves. So does anyone have anything they would like to ask or comment? Scott.
Thanks, Neti. That was great. Very honored to be here for your inaugural Dharma talk. And yes, that was a lovely picture you sent of the intertwining wisteria. I've had a wisteria on my property that I've taken care of. I'm looking at it right now out my window. For 25 years, I've taken care of it, and my vines intertwine too, but not quite like that one that you sent. It was beautiful. And by being twined like that, they appear to be much stronger than they would be if they were by themselves. And being intertwined with the ancestors is like a mutual benefit, like you suggested. And being intertwined with Dogen or Shunryu Suzuki or yourself makes us all stronger. So thank you.
Navani.
I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about the daytime and nighttime are not separate. Yeah, because that's obviously seems counterintuitive.
Okay, so just in case you didn't all hear that, Navani is asking to say a little more about how daytime and nighttime are not separate. Well, one way to think about that is the interdependence of daytime and nighttime. They require each other. And the edge of daytime and the beginning of nighttime can't be located. And when we pull out from a little distance and look at the earth itself, there's no particular spot that is consistently daytime or nighttime. It's a shift. In fact, I was talking with someone this morning about how at any moment in time, about 1/3 of the world's population is asleep. And as one bunch start to wake up on this end, another bunch start to fall asleep on that end. And it's like, it's just sort of rippling around the earth. And within one, you could see the birth as the other is about to birth. The two of them, it's a little bit like a coin. There is sort of one side that you can clearly see, the heads, and then the tail side. But if you split the coin in half, you've just got two coins, and now you've got one that's got a head and something else on the other side. So there's no way to split day and night time to get two separate things, really. I think that is really the point that he's making here, that there is an appearance of two things, daytime and nighttime, but you cannot actually break them up into two different things and have them both exist independently. They can't exist independently of each other. Just like light and dark can't exist independently, cold and heat can't exist independently. And I think even though we can understand that in just a more conventional sense, when we see it in the deeper sense and see how that penetrates every single thing, then when we meet a person that we're having difficulty with, and we understand them as being day and night with us, that we need them for our existence and they need us for our existence, then any sense of I mean, hate is a rather large word, but any sense of sustained aversion disappears. We can't help having kind of like immediate momentary aversion to something. It just happens. Like I saw a snake the other day and I jumped and my heartbeat went up. So I had an immediate sort of not impulsive, yeah, I guess that's the right word, momentary aversion. But as soon as that passed, it was like, oh my God, I love that snake. Yeah, that was the next, that came next. So that's how we want to see any of the dualities. We can, in the immediate, see, and on a functional level, sometimes we need to acknowledge one or the other, just on a functional level. But we want on that deeper, more essential level to feel that total interdependence between us and whatever that other thing is. That Yes, Kathy, is it Kathy? Yes.
This is my first time in a Zendo, so I do apologize if this question is sort of not right for this context, but my housemate and I have an ongoing tarot practice where we draw 7 cards for each week. And I keep pulling the devil card, which it's happened 3 times now. And the devil card represents, many things, but one thing I keep thinking about is this experience of being bound, which is, I think, a kind of entwining that you talked about, being entwined with something that you perhaps is harmful, and you talked about it in an interesting way. I wonder if you could elaborate.
Okay. There's so many things in your question. Where to start? I'm thinking first thing I'd like to say about words like devil or evil from a Buddhist perspective. What we often use for those sorts of ideas is the word ignorance or delusion. And I find this a very helpful way to look at things. Whenever someone appears to be acting in a way that's very harmful, and is very harmful, we can compassionately, without being patronizing towards them, in our minds say they are ignorant of something. They are ignorant of their own true nature, or they're ignorant of the true nature of the person they're being harmful toward. So I think that it's a much gentler and less complicated way to think about poor behavior in the world, to not need to have a thing called evil, but to have just ignorance. Ignorance of how beautiful everything truly is, ignorant of how interconnected everything truly is, and how terrible it is for us to harm anything beyond the inevitable that we can't help. We can't help, we do need to eat food, so we might kill a lettuce plant to eat it, sort of thing. But beyond the inevitable part that all living beings have to, in the web of life, cause harm, we just do our best to minimize it. And so when people maximize the harm they're doing, it's just a delusion. So that's the first thing I would like to say about that. And then intertwining with difficult things, and I spoke about that being an opportunity. It's not that we would ever want to seek out difficult things, and we would never want to really wish difficult things on others. Like it's not that you would say uncompassionately to someone, well, that terrible thing happened to you, so it's just going to make your life better, so stop complaining. That wouldn't be a good thing to do. But to ourselves, and we could wish that for them. If something bad has happened, we could wish for them that will be transformative. But certainly for ourselves, when difficult things happen, practice can make it transformative and beneficial for us. It can. The Buddha was very clear that every situation is a perfect situation for waking up. Every situation is. They can be extremely unpleasant and you wouldn't want to wish them on anybody, but if they do happen, they can be. And it's important to have faith in that, because anything that happens in the present, and the present is the only place where everything is going on. So if you happen to have something happening, which we always are having something happening, if you happen to have something difficult happening, that is the only place you have to work. That's the only place that can wake you up, is that place that you're right in. And I think a lot of us can track back over our lives and can look at difficult experiences that we've had and seeing how they have made us better people. And other difficult experiences haven't necessarily. It's not a romantic notion that they all will. Sometimes difficult things actually just give us post-traumatic stress and we have trouble getting over it. That's the case for some people, and for some of us, for some periods of time. But the capacity is there, and the teachings teachings and support of Sangha can help us take those difficult experiences when we're entwined with something painful, and can help it strengthen us. Is that helpful? Okay, I think we're close to the end of time. Is there any last thing that anyone would like to ask or say? Okay, so just so that you know what's happening next, we'll just do 3 final bows, and then Mavani will sort of just announce that we're finishing, and then we can just bow to each other and sign out.